Welcome, everyone. Can you hear me on this mic? Okay, great. So thanks for being here last week of August, last week of the summer, closing up. This feels like a really, really important and just relevant, and there's lots to say about a topic. So what I want us to just start with doing, I know everyone's been talking to each other for a few minutes, but to just turn to someone who maybe you weren't just talking to and say one sentence about your day, how you're coming into the day, like I have a huge headache and I whatever, or I just ran here from somewhere else, or I'm feeling relaxed, whatever. And one sentence about why you're here in the room for this discussion. Okay, so just take just a minute, turn to somebody. Okay, let's come on back, finish up what you're saying and come on back. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you. Okay, so we are using, as everyone hopefully you know, because you're here and read the email, we are using New York City's mayoral primary as really a case study of some of what is going on with anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, the weaponization of anti-Semitism, all of this, the building and breaking up of progressive coalitions. Okay, so much of this. And we're using this as a case study. So just to frame this again, we're not here. I mean, people can talk. I'm not going to talk about policy issues of any of the candidates or anything like that. I'm going to be talking about the dynamics of this within really the Jewish community, which feels important to talk about as a synagogue community. So what I want to start with is just actually asking the room what you're coming in with, what you know about the primary and what you know about these issues in the primary just already. I think we have a very knowledgeable room on this, but I just want to get a sense of the room so that people are hearing from each other and not just from me. So I'm going to pass around this mic and just hope that some people can just say some things that you're coming in with.
What's interesting that I have read recently is there's more emphasis on being a socialist than being a Muslim. And there seems to be quite a lot of worry in the business community about the fact that he's a socialist. And I haven't delved into it, but that particular view, I think, is interesting.
Okay, good. Right. So I'm actually glad that you started with that, Ruth, because in the context of the Jewish world and the Jewish community, there's so much focus, and this is really what we're going to be talking about, on Mamdani as he's the first Muslim potential mayor. He's been critical of Israel. What does that mean? There's anti-Semitism claims against him. We're going to talk about this. There's huge focus on that. But then outside of our bubble of the Jewish world, he's a socialist mayor running to run New York City, and the issues are way larger than what we're going to focus on here. So I'm glad you started with that. What else?
Yeah, I agree. I think that as a case study, I think this is a really important one for us as Jews, especially those on the left, to talk about, right? Because in a city that has just about as many Jews as Muslims as New York does, it feels like there's been this weaponization of the term anti-Semitism. And when we have talked to our friends in New York, what is it about Mamdani that's anti-Semitic? The only thing that anyone can ever come back with is his position on Israel. And so it feels to me like the dilution of the term anti-Semitism if all you say is his position on Israel, because I know most of my Jewish friends are also really angry at Israel. This definition is way too broad. And to me, this conversation is really important in the microcosm of New York City, because I actually think it's the same conversation we're going to have in the Democratic primary in a couple of years. And I think we need to be, as Jews, we need to be clear on sort of how are we defining what really is anti-Semitism versus what is, pro and anti-Israel. So.
Beautiful. Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, Amy.
So I think the thing that I was kind of taken away from this was that the youngs, that this would be people your age, are finally finding people to wrest power from boomers and those of us who are older than you, and like bringing a vision that is more appropriate for your generation. I find that really fascinating and exciting, honestly, because it feels like a lot of stuff just feels really tired. And this is like, oh, no, this is exciting. And this is someone who's looking forward. So, yeah.
Anyone coming in with yourself or family members who have a lot of criticism of Mamdani, just to put that into the room too. Say some onto the mic. Yeah.
I am coming to this conversation with 4 or 5 very close friends in New York who are all Jewish, who have said that Mamdani would be very, very bad for New York because he's an anti-Semite. And there was nothing I could say that would convince them otherwise. So I think that's a really interesting tell for what's coming up.
So yeah, I have criticism for Mamdani from both sides, right? So actually, versus what Ruben was just saying, on the Jewish side, I don't know if he's anti-Semitic or not. I don't see where he's necessarily had an anti-Semitic statement even attributed to him. However, we do know he's pro-Palestinian, and we do know that for a long, long time, he refused to repudiate globalizing the Intifada, which is basically triggering for any Jew. So yeah, we can get into is anti-Zionism the same as anti-Semitism, but there is a demarcation there. So that's number one, okay? And then on the socialist side, okay, I mean, I'm a capitalist, okay, I don't mind saying it, but I'm a capitalist who believes in giving everybody a fair share. I mean, this country runs on capitalism, and unfortunately, socialism has not worked. And as idealistic as he may be, that's currently not I don't know what the answer in New York is, but it's like Josh Kraft getting on a commercial here and saying, I'm going to solve the housing crisis here. Of course he has no plan. How the heck is he going to do that, right? And then last but not least, and you and I talked about this in terms of the excitement of people of your generation. Yeah, you're excited, but the Bronx isn't excited, okay? And who needs to benefit by the policies? It's the Bronx, it's Staten Island, okay? The demographics are such that the people who voted for Mamdani are probably mostly people of your age who make some type of a 6-figure income. And that's not gonna help the poorest county in the country.
Yeah, so just from some relatives in New York, I think your question was, have you, what were some negatives, especially from a Jewish perspective? I've heard a lot that come from both being the fact that he is Muslim and pro-Palestinian, and that he's going to bring Sharia. So I've seen like a lot of memes, like he's going to bring Sharia law to New York, and you see new buildings in New York that are all like Islamic mosque architecture with like towers and what are those called? Minarets. Thank you, minarets, and just stoking that like xenophobic fear that like pushing on that nerve, and very frustrating to get those, I have to say. But I also it's just especially coming from Jews who have been othered so much in our history to kind of, you know, hit those very superficial notes and not really go into the substantive issues is very frustrating as well.
Well, when I think of Mamdani, I think of Jeremy Corbyn. And they really, to me, evoke the same wavelength. And to me, the big difference is that is the country. I think, I guess I can be blunt. Can I be blunt? I think American Jews are very, very complacent about how safe we are here. And, you know, we don't have a sense of being in danger because we're here, we're safe. And I have a lot of family in Europe, and Europe is an extremely dangerous place. That includes England, an extremely dangerous place for Jews to walk outside, to wear a yarmulke. It's very, very dangerous. And here it's only beginning to show that kind of danger for Jews. And so people, you know, I think a lot of American Jews just don't have a sense that we are at risk by bringing in somebody like Mamdani. It kind of reminds me of Berlin in 1933, you know, that everything's going to be all right. It's, you know, it's not going to really be as bad as they say it's going to be, and so forth. And I just want to bring up one meme that I quote every year on Purim, when we say on Purim, we drink until we can't tell the difference between Haman and Mordechai. And lately, people have been saying that we drink until we can't tell the difference between left-wing anti-Semitism and right-wing anti-Semitism. And I just think that, you know, American Jews are just not as alert to the risks of being Jewish as people in Europe are, and as we could be.
Okay, let's hear from a few more people and then I'll say so. Okay, Ruth, just since you already said something, let's hear, okay, David, then we'll pass it over there, and then Ruth will go to you, and then I will, I'm going to show up.
Yeah, it strikes me that the questions that he raises are, he's clearly anti-Zionist. And if you're anti-Zionist, does that make you anti-Semitic? And as Jews, we're, I think, at least from myself, I struggle with my identity as a Jew and Israel's identity as a Jewish state. And the things that are being done in Israel, ostensibly in my name, which I find horrific, is the problem. So, you know, he's clearly speaking out in a voice about anti-Zionism, which inherently means that he is pro-Palestinian. But like many people, there's probably a little bit of lack of historical understanding and ignorance to the views that they take. And so they'll say things without fully appreciating the hurt that those statements create, like the Intifada comments. And that when explained to them how hurtful those comments are, they retract them, which is what he's been doing, which is why he has, you know, progressive leaders, Jewish, you know, and Jewish support in New York City. So, you know, it's a like a spectrum, right? People slide back and forth on that in many ways, and this is an example of that.
I don't know. I get his name correct. Moldavi, or how do you pronounce it? Moldavi. I think we also have to look at what is the appeal about this guy, because apparently people will tell him what they think, and he may not always agree with them, but he listens. That's the thing. He listens, acknowledges everyone's viewpoint, which I think is something we can all do, and we should be doing anyways. It's just the left has gotten so far left and the right's gotten so far the right. The country's just gotten divided, and we need to pull back in the center. And it's something that we all need to do. We don't have to depend on, but it'd be good if we all start practicing it. So just my 2 cents.
Thanks. So there's a lot of things about him that don't bother me. He's running for mayor. I don't care if he's socialist or not. I mean, I've got those leanings myself, but he's not going to have the power to nationalize our corporations. He's going to be the mayor of a city. I haven't seen the memes, but I think that minarets are beautiful. So bring it on. I mean, that would be fine. In terms of his anti-Zionism, many of us are anti-Netanyahu. Many of us are very upset about the war in Gaza, but we want to see Israel to continue as a Jewish state. And so you can be anti-Israeli policies right now, but I'm not sure where he comes down on his anti-Zionism. Is it what's going on right now, or is it anti-Israel as a Jewish state? So that's my concern.
Yeah.
He clarified to say, smartly, I think, that he recognizes Israel as a state, but he wants to see it as a state with equal rights, not as a quote unquote Jewish state. But the counter to that is, well, what about the 23 Muslim states around there? So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, okay, let's have Susanna, and then Ruth, if you want to take
just a couple of things just to add to the conversation. One is when we're saying, oh, he's a socialist. I think about New York, and I think about probably many of our parents, grandparents, or great-grandparents were hardcore socialists. They organized the unions, the International Ladies Garment Workers Union. I mean, the Jews, that's what the Jews brought to New York. So I do want to recognize that heritage and that legacy. It's very powerful and important. That's one thing I just wanted to say. The other thing is, when I started seeing and reading all these sort of scary comments about Mamdani's views about Israel, Palestine, Palestinians, even the globalized intifada, whatever, there were a lot of responses saying, no, the mayor of New York City has almost nothing to do with what happens in the Middle East. But there is a history of every mayor in recent memory going on the obligatory trip to Israel. And I personally think that is absurd and unnecessary and not good. And I think that Jews have felt like this kind of Jewish supremacy in New York City. And when you actually look at the demographics, it is such a hugely diverse city, and Jews are not the owners of New York. And in fact, I think we really need to be in an alliance now that is addressing what is truly feeling like 1938 Germany, which is the Trump administration. And so I'm kind of cautiously excited. I think it's amazing and wonderful that so many young people, Jews and non-Jews, are excited about New York City politics and are out there. And I think his campaign techniques are incredibly creative and funny and fun, and it's that comedic part of it is, I think it's great.
I just want to throw in the mix. I am more concerned these days about Christian nationalism and that movement rather than a Muslim in another minority that's also going to be prejudiced against. Because we are, I mean, if you follow Americans United, you understand what is going on in the country and how dangerous that whole Christian nationalist movement is.
I want to hear from you again. Ruth, that's a good lead-in to what I'm going to talk about, which is here, and then we're going to view actually some clips of Mamdani. So if I sit, can everyone still see me? Okay, great. So just a transparent goal. Every time we've had these conversations, this is the third of them. Lenny, are you videoing me? No. Okay. That's too distracting. I have like, it's like all the get the sense of what it's like to be Brad Lander or something. Okay. So what was I saying? Okay, I've done these conversations when I feel personally like there's some intervention that we need to have as a conversation as a Jewish community because things are really confused. Okay, like when things are really confused, that's when I think it's like the most important to talk about it. So the first one we did was on anti-Semitism, and we read over, which I printed out again here just for myself, this big email that I had sent out to the community. And then the second one was on Israel, Gaza, where things are very, very confused. And this election, I feel like things are really confusing, like from all sides. It's confusing. So it's important to talk about it. So first, Nina, I just want to talk about what you were talking about anti-Semitism on the left and the right and how it's like coming from all places. And just say a little bit of like how I'm thinking about that, which is actually just to read something directly from this email, which all of you probably have already read that I sent out. But I'm just going to read it. This is my own words. Okay. So just going to read my own words. And this is what I wrote in that email. I deeply believe that one of the biggest problems in our world today is that no one is dealing with anti-Semitism effectively. Okay, and then I have these 4 scenes. So the first scene is a progressive Jewish community, perhaps maybe like our own, and someone says like, shh, no, don't make a big deal of that bomb threat at the JCC. There are so many more people who are more urgently oppressed than we are. We don't need to talk about ourselves. We don't need to take up a ton of space. Okay, that's not really a good way to deal with anti-Semitism. Okay, second thing, a conversation that I often have with family members. I wrote here my mom's side of the family. They all hate us. Everyone hates us. It's inevitable. We're always hated by everyone. And I wrote in here, I feel anxiety come back strongly to my body, the opposite of healing, as this cousin recounts why, inevitably, we will never be safe anywhere we go. Okay, so everyone understood why I think both those first 2 scenes are not good at dealing with anti-Semitism. The first one is like minimizing it. The second one is like saying it's inevitable and we will never be safe, so just, that's it. Okay, third scene, a climate rally where I don't necessarily expect anything about my own Jewish identity to come up, but my progressive movement siblings say something about Israel that bleeds into true anti-Semitism, and no one calls it out because no one knows how to. Okay, also not good. Okay. Last scene, a scene where, in my opinion, anti-Semitism is purposeful, intentional, and authentic. A white supremacist rally in the US and the shouting of Jews will not replace us. Okay. And then I wrote, again, anti-Semitism is not being dealt with effectively in any of these above scenes. I know I have found myself in several of these scenes, sometimes playing one role, sometimes playing the opposite role. Okay, and then I was talking about how the people in scene 1 need to know that it's okay to stand up for ourselves as Jews. The people in scene 2 need to know that if we expect others to stand up for us as Jews, we cannot self-isolate. We can't build walls around ourselves and refuse to stand up for others or think that we're the only ones who are vulnerable and then therefore say, you know what, we can't risk standing up for the Muslim community because then we might not be safe. That won't keep us safe. This is what I'm saying, or we can't risk standing up for it. There's a lot going on right now where security, it seems like there's this threat of security grants that are hoping people will cooperate with ICE. And there's like this risk of Jewish communities, for example, saying, well, we might want to make sure that we have security, so we might just have to cooperate with ICE. Like that's not actually gonna keep us safe in the end. Okay, so that's scene 2. And the people in scene 3, who are what I was calling like the anti-Semitism on the left from non-Jews, need to do the hard, challenging learning to be able to stand effectively in solidarity with us as Jews. I feel like, David, you were saying some of that too, like with what you said, which I really agree with. I have a lot of experience of like somebody, a non-Jew, saying something to me that I actually like feel is anti-Semitic and know that people often in our climate in the world will be like, you're anti-Semitic. Oh, you hate me and go away, build a wall. But actually my experience is like, if you're in relationship with that person, you say, hey, ouch, like that didn't feel so good. Most people will be like, oh, like, wait, what, why? Just like the same way that we could say something that's Islamophobic or racist and then hear someone say, ouch, and then change. Okay. And scene 4, this Jews will not replace us, Charlottesville rally, my analysis of that, I said the people in scene 4, in my opinion, are not people with whom we should be working. So a different analysis than I have of scene 3, where I'm like, those people might be being anti-Semitic, but it's okay to work with them. And by the way, just a little bit of a teaser, I think there's some things that Mamdani had said that it's like, wish he would have said that better. But like Ron said, like, it does seem like he's listening. It doesn't seem like he's somebody we can't work with. Whereas like a Christian nationalist, a white supremacist who's actually like a Nazi, that person is not somebody who I personally feel like I can say like, ouch, like that hurt. Can you adjust that a little bit? Because it's actually in their analysis, their core analysis, that they're not fighting for our safety. Okay, so that's just like a little bit of like where I'm coming from with the anti-Semitism thing. The other thing that I'll say, just Nina, to what you're saying is right now, just where I'm coming from is I'm like, yes, there's anti-Semitism on the left and on the right, and the right has access to federal power and the left doesn't. So like important difference in terms of a power analysis of where, okay. And
I hear everything that you're saying, but I think in this day and age, and it's proven, what you're not saying is even on the left, and it's almost a shame to call these people left because I don't even find them that they're left. But in a lot of these pro-Palestinian demonstrations, which technically are the left, there are, I don't know who they are, but there's no question they're anti-Semitic. When they're saying the ovens weren't enough for you, I mean, this is pure anti-Semitism. It equates exactly to the far right. Okay, so you don't want to talk to those people either. Okay, the second thing I was going to say to your point. I'm sorry. Oh no, oh my God. Then we're obviously looking at different things. I understand who you know, but you don't know, just like we don't know the far right people because we don't get together with those people. No, I'm just sitting here saying that just like there are these people on the far right that you know are anti-Semites, there are people that in theory are on the far left. And we can't forget them because you're not going to change their mind either.
I just want to say, Henry, thank you for that. I completely agree that anyone who is basically not holding up the humanity of anyone is not somebody that I want to work with. Somebody who's like making mistakes and it's not part of their core analysis to do violence and annihilation of humans is somebody who might be making a mistake. So I agree with you. Thank you for saying that. And I think that the reason, and just what I want to say is you were saying like, Rabbi Aliza, you just invisibilized like the people on the far left who do that. And I'm like, thank you for that correction. You're right, I did. And what I was saying with the power thing is that those people are not in the offices of the federal government right now. Okay. So okay, yes. But they're not. Okay, thank you, Henry.
Yeah, I don't know if people saw the headline just yesterday from Australia. Australia did a year's worth of investigation on 2 major anti-Semitic attacks. One was the arson of a synagogue. I don't remember what the other one was. They were 2, and they spent a year investigating these attacks, and they concluded that they were engineered by Iran. Okay. Now, I think it's very naive to think that those are the only 2 anti-Semitic attacks in the world that Iran is behind. I think Iranian money is behind a lot of this, and a lot of the campus demonstration. I know it is. It's behind a lot of the campus demonstrations, and it's funneled from Iran through Qatar and so forth. This is international work against Jews.
You are 100% correct. And I think that the thing, though, that we should feel a little bit more safe about is that it was the Australian government that did the year's work to uncover that plot, and that it is going to be our governments here that will do the same. The institutions are protecting us for the most part. Like, so far, I am scared about the future. I'm acknowledging the future doesn't feel great right now, but up to now, the institutions are protecting. There is definitely anti-Semitism on the left. There is much more, seemingly much more violent anti-Semitism on the right up to now. I also, if I can sort of shift a little bit, the globalized intifada thing is something that I've taken very personally. Mimi and I were both living in Israel when the first intifada broke out. We both were in situations where rocks were thrown at our buses, at things that we were at. So we both sort of feel that term intifada as a term of violence. And I have spent a lot of time since Mamdani announced doing some soul searching and some investigation into what is the real meaning of that term. For instance, did we know that the Holocaust Museum used that term intifada to describe the Warsaw Uprising up until November of 2023? They changed their language after that attack, or 22. I'm getting my years wrong. The point I am making, I've spent a lot of time with some of my Muslim friends talking about that term and how they perceive it versus how I perceive it, because I perceived it as a term of violence, and they perceive it as a term of uprising, of it's time to change the environment, to change what's happening in Israel. And so while I'm not saying that I'm right or they're right, at least we have to be willing to listen to one another on this topic. I want Mamdani, and I haven't heard him say this because I'm not paying that close attention to the mayor's race. I would like to hear him say, I'm opposed to all violence. I'm opposed to violence against all people. Maybe he has said that, I'm not sure. But what I would like to say is, like, the term globalizing intifada does not by definition mean what we may instinctively feel about it. And we have to be willing to hear that from other people as well.
Thanks, Ruben. That's great. And actually, just because this is coming up and because it's been so central in this discussion, we are going to watch the original clip of him talking. So we're going to watch that in a second, but I'm really just glad to be populating the room with where we're all coming from. Okay, so a little bit more from me, and I hope all of this is context. All of this is context, then we're going to watch some original clips. So those 4 scenes about anti-Semitism, just back to why are we having these conversations when there are interventions, when things are confusing? To me, the most confusing thing, and actually I'm happy, I don't feel like our community is that confused about it, but the larger community seems very confused about Project Esther, right? That Project Esther is, and if you haven't, I'm not going to say everything that I've said over the past months here, but basically the main thing I want to say is that just a reminder about how anti-Semitism has functioned a lot in history, not always, but a lot, anti-Semitism, a lot of oppressions work. This is just some political education or whatever, political education. A lot of oppressions work to keep the oppressed group at the bottom of society with stereotypes like that. Like, Black people are poor or dirty. Sometimes anti-Semitism has worked like that. It's not right, and keep people at the bottom. But mostly anti-Semitism has worked in a really different way, which is that it has kept Jews in a position of what's called relative power relative to other oppressed groups, separating Jews out from other oppressed groups, and then targeting us for our destruction when actually all of us are oppressed by the same force. Okay, that was very abstract, but let me just give the example of Nazi Germany. Okay, the stereotypes against Jews are relative power. Jews own the media. Jews own the banks, right? Those are the types of Jews, separating Jews from the rest of the oppressed groups that Nazis were targeting, and then blamed us. No genocide of people happens just because people are thinking those people are human or not to blame, right? Blamed us for what was going on, but who actually has the power? Obviously not Jews, but the Christian nationalists, the Nazis. And so then we're targeted for our destruction. So any time that Jews are being pitted against another oppressed group, this is like a kind of a warning sign to like, watch out. That's generally the way that anti-Semitism functions in the landscape of oppressions. Not all oppressions like work the same way, right? And so in the landscape of oppressions, when you see Jews being pitted against another group, and especially when you see Jews in a position of relative power or like conceived relative power being pitted against another oppressed group, but actually you know that those groups are being oppressed and targeted by the same force, that's a time to watch out if you're looking throughout history. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is we're just gonna watch Mamdani. So Lenny, the one that I want you to share is, or it maybe Benita's sharing it. Benita sharing. Okay, so Benita, thank you so much. So I think it's like the first email that I sent to Lenny. It's an interview. It's not, there's like a lot of links in the second email, but the first email is just one link. So share that, but no problem. We can definitely be patient. So just a little framing. We already got some framing from the room about this, but there's this huge, so much talk about Mamdani not ever condemning the phrase globalize the intifada. Okay. And thanks for what you said, Ruben, and both of you for that personal sharing too. So I just am like, want to say that I really heard you on this. Sounds very scary. Yeah. Who has just raise your hand if you've like read something about this? Like he didn't condemn the phrase. Okay. He didn't condemn it. Okay. Great. Okay. So a lot of people in the room, and raise your hand if you've actually seen what he actually said. Okay. Les, Henry. Good.
He's now come to understand that is triggering to Jews, and therefore he's basically saying, okay, I understand that we should not be using that phrase. And that's my thing. Let me just add, by the way, there's a couple of us in this room Ruben mentioned about the Intifada. Here in our congregation, we had a congregant, Janice Coulter, who lived here in West Roxbury, who was a converted by Rabbi Tensner, who went to study at Hebrew University and was a victim about 20 years ago. It was just her yard site at the terrorist attack at Hebrew University. So, I'm not supposed to what it is. Ruben, Mimi might be, but I think about it because as a community, it has affected us.
And I think that's really important. Mamdani, if he is the mayor, is going to be the mayor for a huge number of Jews. So he needs to be sensitive to where we're coming from. And by the way, he's not only the mayor for Jews, he's also the mayor for a lot of Muslims. So he also needs to be sensitive to where they're coming from. So hard job, not an easy job. I don't envy it. But what I want to say, and this is just the framing that I just want to give for this video, is the following framing, which is just one particular framing. Okay, but this is the framing that I want us to focus on. Is that you guys saw, like, so many people had heard about this, right? Reading, he's not condemning the phrase, and most of what I read about that, just to say, is that it was organizations saying this guy is an anti-Semite. He doesn't care about Jewish safety. He's anti-Semitic. He's dangerous for Jews in New York. We all need to leave. Okay, that was like what most of the writing was about. And most people read that, but didn't watch what he actually said. Okay, and the framing that I want to just put out here is, my sense is that there's a lot of Islamophobia going on at Zoran, and a lot of use of anti-Semitism, like this weaponization of anti-Semitism. He's an anti-Semite to make people be against him without listening to him. Okay, now if you listen to him and you're against what he said, that's one thing. But if you're reading about him and the sources are saying he hates Jews, he hates Jews, he hates Jews, of course, you're gonna believe that, especially if we Jews right now are so scared. And this is one of the things that I get actually angry about on behalf of Jews, because I'm like, because I am like, we are so scared. Don't manipulate our fear. It's really horrible. I feel very like sad and heartbroken for us as Jews when that happens, when people are doing that. So, okay. So with that frame of knowing what you've read about it, and so now Benita, you can share this interview. I just want to make sure that
there
it's
obviously is anti-Semitism on the right, but there's anti-Semitism coming from the left and coming from these protests. And one example I think of is this phrase, globalize the intifada, which is a very popular phrase at protests on the left. Maybe some people say that phrase with good intent, but there's certainly some people who are saying that phrase with violent intent. So I wonder what you think about that, about the phrase globalized intifada and what we've seen as some anti-Semitism coming from the left-wing protesters.
The first thing, as you were saying, is anti-Semitism is a real issue in our city. And it's one that can be captured in statistics, the ones that you're citing. It's also one that you will feel in conversations you have with Jewish New Yorkers across the city. This is something that has to be the focus of the next mayoral administration, is not just talking about it, but tackling it. And these are the conversations that have informed our commitment around increasing funding for anti-hate crime programming by 800% in our Department of Community Safety. To the question of language that's being used, I am someone who am less comfortable with the idea of banning the use of certain words, and that I think it is more evocative of a Trump-style approach to how to lead a country.
Sure, but does that just make you uncomfortable? Like the phrase globalized intifada, from the river to the sea, does that make you uncomfortable?
I know people for whom those things mean very different things. To me, ultimately, what I hear in so many is a desperate desire for equality and equal rights in standing up for Palestinian human rights. And I think what's difficult also is that the very word has been used by the Holocaust Museum when translating the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising into Arabic, because it's a word that means struggle. Muslim man who grew up post 9/11, I'm all too familiar in the way in which Arabic words can be twisted, can be distorted, can be used to justify any kind of meaning. And I think that's where it leaves me with a sense that what we need to do is focus on keeping Jewish New Yorkers safe. And the question of permissibility of language is something that I haven't ventured into.
Obviously, anti-Semitism on the right.
Okay, thank you, Benita, so much. So I just want to hear some reactions specifically on especially what I was saying about, like, if you are somebody who's read about that, but this is the first time that you've seen his actual response, how it's landing with you.
I'm not sure if this is your question, but the thing that just keeps on ringing out and sending up like lots of red flags is like, how is this so central to the mayoral race? I mean, that just is like, something's weird about that and very uncomfortable. But to your question, it sounds like a very rational, reasoned approach of someone who's trying to balance all the safety of all of his constituents and understanding how meaning is distorted in this, kind of sensationalized, polarized media world we all live in, and that he supports safety of Jews and safety of Muslims. And what he's looking for, he said, equal rights of Palestinians, not, the end of a Jewish state. And so what we would call that specifically did not sound anti-Zionist. I know that's not the whole statement, but not only not anti-Semitic, but also not even anti-Zionist is what I heard.
The thing that I didn't hear in that was his condemnation of from the river to the sea. He didn't really get there. He said, oh, it could mean different things to different people. But he didn't call out the fact that that used to mean destroy all Jewish lives. And that is the powerful thing to me.
On its face, it was simply a very political answer, no different than you would see any Republican on Sunday morning on any of the talk shows, not answering the question that was posed to them by pick their interviewer. I just want to respond to Mark for a second. The reason it's important in New York City is because it's the home to 1.2 million Jews that have just been terrorized by what's happened at Columbia and other colleges. So that's why it's on their mind, or at least not necessarily the younger people, the progressive people, but certainly the communities in Brooklyn and elsewhere that have actually had a ton of anti-Semitic attacks, and the statistics bear them out. That's why it's important. But otherwise, it's your typical political answer.
Thank you all. Okay, so I'll just say my own. Daniel, sorry, walked right back.
It's been hard to say anything because there's just too much in my head. So this is just a little, but we had some teas, casual teas after October 7th at BU with just a handful of faculty and students who were feeling incredibly stressed, students who were Palestinian and or supporters of Palestinians, and students who were Jewish, some of whom were strong Zionists, some of whom were not. But one of the things that we really talked about was language in protests. And I think it was so instructive on all sides. It is, yes, from the river to the sea has been used by Hamas as a way, as a call to yes. But for many of the Palestinian students, some of whom have family in Gaza, some of whom grew up in Jordan, grew up in Syria, they get to see relatives in their old homeland, but they don't get to go there otherwise. For them, it means free movement in the land of their grandparents. So when I hear him talk, it doesn't seem like political evasion to me at all. It feels very real.
I'll just point out that, and this is why, just a meta comment, this is why this election is just like, this is why it's so important that we're talking about it, because it's at the heart of, it just feels to me like so starkly at the heart of everything. I'll just point out that with what both of you just said, everyone here is feeling victimized, and everyone is victimized. Okay, I'll just point out, related to what I said about anti-Semitism before, like both Jews, Henry, what you just said, you're like, it's important because Jews are feeling like scared and like the victim. And Deanna, I mean, what you just said, I mean, I don't have to explain when like, so there's mass starvation happening in Gaza that Palestinians feel like the victim, right? Like both feel like the victim. And by the way, this is a situation where we have Jews and Muslims pitted against each other, both feeling like the victim, with Jews in relative power relation to Palestinians, Israel as the occupying force of Palestinians. So, and larger interests like Trump, for example, at play, when both of us are feeling victimized, that's a warning sign of something. So all of that is in this and to be thought carefully about. So thank you for saying that. And I'll just say that my reaction to this as a Jew watching was, I also, like, I agree. I think Ruben actually, you said this in the meet. You're like, and you said it here today too. Like, I want him to say like, I just condemn violence against Jews. Like, I also was like, okay, just obviously that the interviewer's like asking you to be a little pastoral to Jews for a second. Like, that was my reaction. Like, just say to us, like, I condemn violence against you. I would just say that. And I felt like his answer was a little like heady kind of, or something like that. But it wasn't, you know, his very first response there was like, anti-Semitism is a huge problem in New York City, and we're increasing our budget by 800% on anti-hate crime, whatever. And he ended the answer by saying the main thing we have to do is not just talk about it, but keep Jews safe. So I'm like, he did speak to the, and then I think it's true that in these, he's learning, it's, I have to actually discourage that phrase. It seems like he's learning that. And also clearly, what also seems clear is that he's in relationship with both Jews and Palestinians, thank God, but he's in relationship with Palestinians who are fighting for their freedom and saying that phrase, like you're saying, Deanna, like for some people from the river to the sea. And he said, like, I know that phrase means different things to different people. He's obviously in relationship with people who, if he condemned that phrase, they would feel like that was violent. So it's a hard position that he's in. Yeah, Ruth, go ahead.
This may be naive, but two thoughts that I have. Number one, there is a prominent Jewish politician in New York that is supporting him, Brad Larner, or I mean, how you have to take the measure of the people who are supporting him and have some faith in their values. The other thought I've been having for some time is we know, or at least I know through my connections, the many non-Jews who have converted to Judaism. If they were to, I can't even express their concern. I mean, they're becoming Jews entering into a world that we perceive as anti-Semitic. Why would they do that? So, I mean, among Jews, we have the ultra fundamentalists that do not relate to anything I relate to. And within the Muslim world, there are the fundamentalists. So it is not simple, but there are many points of view.
Just a question. So New York has 8 million, 9 million people, something like that. And we're talking about two groups that equal maybe 2.5 million. What's going on with everyone else and their opinions?
That's actually a really good lead into something that I want to. Okay, so Benita, okay, before you, gonna ask you to share a picture thing, but I'm gonna just say something about it first. Okay, so just to what you just said, Mimi. So, something that just really concerns me clearly, and I'm being transparent here about my views, and like hopefully everybody knows. I think everybody knows this, but everybody can disagree with me whether I say it or not, but it's good. It's good for me to just say. So I actually heard this. I heard somebody said to me, a reverend, I think it was, said, my job as clergy is to speak with my own integrity from the pulpit, and your job as like the pulpit is to disagree with me. I thought that was really good. It's like it's like everybody has to be in their authenticity, or else this is not going to work. But so Mimi, I've been feeling this whole thing too. Is like, Mark, what you're saying about like there's some red flag about like, why is the whole mayoral campaign about this? And Mimi, what you just said. And what I will say now, so do people know Eric Adams? Eric Adams, right? Lots of current mayor of New York City. Lots of corruption. I mean, that I don't want to. That there's been a lot of like corruption charges against him. There's a lot of drama around his being mayor. What'd you say, Amy? He's not a good guy, Amy says. So yeah, there's a lot about him that in the, okay. He is, and this is, I mean, I
mean, there's something about a lot of gold from Turkey, or so it's. I mean, getting into it isn't tied to some sort of Arab. You know, we talked about the money from Iran, the money from Qatar. This is from Turkey. A lot of that influence is driving anti-Israel sentiments in universities and other institutions and government in the U.S. Yeah, they pay for a lot of institutions, a lot of senators and congressmen's campaigns.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. So this, I mean, I will just say that with all of this, there's so much, I mean, there is so much about this globally. It's true. It's like, it feels like we're talking in New York City, and it's like, okay, I'll just say transparently, it's like, I feel like I can wrap my hand around this, but then it's like, the bigger it gets, it's like, it's confusing. And it's like, I'm open to being wrong. I'm open to, this is, yeah. So, okay. So, just on this, that Jews, Palestinians, and all this is playing such a huge role in this, mayoral election. So Eric Adams, who's mayor now, is running on a ballot line that is called, does anyone know what it's called? His ballot line, he's running on the ballot line. He's called this, I'm running on the End Anti-Semitism campaign. It's almost like that to me, almost like if you're like red flag, red flag, red flag, something is going weird here and I should pay attention and not just trust whatever I'm reading. I've never heard a bigger red flag than that. Why would you run on the End Anti-Semitism? I mean, and it plays into exactly how. So he is also fighting Cuomo on like, we're trying to end anti-Semitism. That's how we're gonna win this election. Okay. So all of this is, and Benita, will you share that picture now, if you can? Yeah, okay, so does everyone see that? That's just basically what I said. Oh, that's good, Benita, that's great. Are you doing that, Lenny? That's great. Eric Adams, so this is Politico, which just in the like practice of citing our sources is, people can say more than me. I actually don't know that much about Politico, but it's like a centrist, kind of centrist, right? Suzanne, I'm looking at you what do you, it's a little left. It's left of center. Okay, great. Yeah, so left of center, good, thank you, that's good. Good. What? Very solid reporting, says Henry and a bunch of people here. Okay, good. Okay, so yeah, so good. Okay, so Eric Adams plans to run on an End Anti-Semitism ballot line. The pick first reported, okay, a challenge to mayoral front runner Andrew Cuomo, who's also running on his opposition to anti-Semitism. Okay, so this is just like what's going on here with these guys in the, all of this is about anti-Semitism. And I want to say that it feels like, and we're about to talk about Brad Lander, to me, it feels like there is all this, I don't know. It's like what you said who said at the beginning, if the word anti-Semitism only means support for Israel or anti-Semitism, whatever, if standing up for Jews only means like starch support for Israel, but doesn't mean talking to Jewish New Yorkers and protecting your own constituents, it's kind of like, so what are you doing? And interestingly, the reason I'll just say, I just randomly found this picture. I was just looking for what the reason I sent it to Lenny and Benita, I randomly found it because I was trying to find what the actual ballot line was called. So I found that End Anti-Semitism. But then I put this in here because I also thought it was interesting. The caption, it's small, so you can't, so I'll just read it. New York City Mayor Eric Adams, seen here at a Combat Anti-Semitism movement event from his 2023 trip to Tel Aviv, plans to center his staunch support for Israel. That's what it says, which is kind of like, what? Like it's almost like, what? Right? It's almost like confusing. It's like, you're saying that End Anti-Semitism. So it's just, these things are getting conflated, and in a time when Israel is committing atrocities that a lot of us are against, this, like, it's like, what I want for someone to fight anti-Semitism is to protect Jews, not necessarily to protect like a nation. I want them to protect Israelis also, who are 50% of Jews in the world are Israelis. So it's not that I don't want them to, it's not, I actually happen, I don't know if everyone, I happen to have a feeling about Jews in the world. I don't know where I got this from. I don't think my parents feel like this, but I really do feel like one family with other Jews. I actually don't have this feeling for whatever, I don't know why. I feel like a violent settler, I'm like, he's in my family. I don't feel that separate from him. I don't know why. I feel like he's, so I actually do feel like one family with Jews. So I'm like, I want him to protect Israelis and all Jews, even as the mayor of New York, whatever. I do have that feeling, but I don't care of like staunch support for whatever the policies of the nation state of Israel are. That's not, and right now we're in this wild moment where all those things are getting really conflated, and we kind of we just have to watch out. We have to watch out. Yeah, Ruben.
If I can bring this home actually just a little bit. I run in some progressive circles in Boston, less so than I used to. And I got word a couple months ago, or maybe a month ago, that a progressive organization was trying to pigeonhole Josh Kraft, who I do not support, into giving an answer on his feelings about Gaza and Israel. And I let those people know that, in my view, demanding that a Jewish candidate for mayor, even one I didn't support, answer that question feels anti-Semitic. It felt really off to me. And I think that it's very comparable to this conversation. Running for mayor of New York on a line of protecting Israel is really very comparable to demanding that a Jewish candidate for mayor in Boston also have, their line in the sand one way or another. So I just feel like we really need to be cautious and thoughtful about, like, what is the job that we are actually asking these people to do. We want Jews to be protected, and I really did appreciate his value statement as a person who's run a couple of campaigns. He was very disciplined, and like, he stated the values of, we have to protect Jews, anti-Semitism is a priority, and I appreciate the value statement, even if he didn't say all the words that we would have liked sort of on the specific topics. And I think that's important. But like, I just feel like, boy, the mission creep on these jobs on mayors in America, of where we're expecting them to be on positions in Israel on either side, has gotten just completely out of hand.
Well, actually, to Ruben's point, not only is it unfair, I think, to ask, it's happening not just mayor of here in Boston, but it's happening. Any Jewish candidate anywhere in this country right now has to state their position on Israel. Further, any Muslim candidate has to state their position on Israel, right? So it actually, in this particular case, it works both ways. And there's this litmus test, right? So for anybody, that's correct. Well, okay, so that's a great point, which is why I was incredibly angry at every city council, but especially the Boston City Council, for doing their referendums on Israel. I wanted to fix my streets. I wanted to fix my potholes. Why are you doing a why aren't you doing the people's work? Okay, but anyway, but I think that's a good point.
So that goes to the point that I was going to raise, which is beyond this discussion, which seems to be overshadowing, dominating in a crazy way, at least among Jews and Muslims and people who are involved in the Middle East crisis, let's say, as well as efforts to prevent Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, lie all the other issues for New York City and the 75%, 80% maybe of the population that are not Muslim or Jewish or Palestinian or Israeli Americans, let's say. And as Jews, I think it's really important, incumbent on us, to bring our Jewish values, and in our case, in this community, our Jewish progressive values, to the issues in the race, which are really critical. They may start with anti-corruption in the case of Adams, who also has done like really insane things towards the Trump administration to get them to remove the prosecutors who were prosecuting his corruption, which was criminal allegations, serious criminal allegations. But in Cuomo's case, we know that story too. So, we have these other candidates who are really pretty sickening. And here we have a candidate who is talking about the high cost of housing, which is insane in New York, as it is in Boston, talking about immigrant rights, talking about transportation, talking about things that are really important and have been important historically and currently should be to Jews as Jews with our values. And I think that the saddest thing about all of this is that it has completely taken over the actual critical policy issues that should be in discussion in New York City and the rest of the country, because everyone, and the other reason this conversation is so important is that everyone is looking at this, not everyone, but a lot of people are looking at this race as symbolic of what the future might be in dealing with the challenges that the Democratic Party faces.
And this is like an example of, we've lost the plot. We've lost the plot.
So I just view this as pandering, right? It's pandering to a block of voters. And it's no different than the Trump administration and the way that they've weaponized their anti-Semitic campaigns and going after universities, right? Because it's total horse manure, right? And so because it's like, pay attention to this, pay attention to this, pay attention to this anti-Semitism stuff and all these terrible, professors and all this awful stuff that's going on campuses and Jewish students being threatened, and I'm going to protect you. The last person in the world that I expect to be protected by is the person that's sitting in the White House. And all of this stuff distracts from what the actual agenda is. And so, when I think about the way the administration is going after immigrants, right? I'm just one generation removed from immigrants. I'm 2 generations removed from family that I can identify who were lost in the Holocaust, right? And so I don't feel safe or protected by this government. And I had this conversation with my wife this morning, and I said that to her, and she looked at me incredulously, and she said, "Really?" And I said, "Really?" Because I can draw the line. I can look at the parallels. And while Eric Adams may not be building on a fascist propaganda agenda and a playbook like the Trump administration is, it's still pandering. And to Susanna's point, it's not dealing with the issues, the fundamental issues of what people need in the city of New York, which is, and when you stop talking about all the anti-Semitism stuff and you focus on what are the real economic issues that are affecting people's lives, then you can really see some differences that perhaps you can disagree with whether he goes too far, whether his housing policies and rent control, maybe that is untenable. Certainly worth having a conversation about. And there's lots of inequities in the system, and those need to be discussed. But starting with, I'm going to protect against anti-Semitism, it's just touching a trigger point, and it's meaningless at the end of the day.
So, Rabbi Aliza, you kind of brought Project Esther to us and made us understand the Heritage Foundation, right-wing conservative foundation, is using anti-Semitism as a distraction, and not to the benefit of the Jewish people, Jewish Americans, because it's actually putting an even bigger target on our back, likely, and because we're taking the blame as a scapegoat for all of these policies to defund universities, to deport immigrant students. But that picture that was just shown, where now it's not the right-wing Heritage Foundation anymore, but it's, I would say, either centrist or even probably really liberal politicians like Cuomo, like Adams, that are now using anti-Semitism as a political tool against a Muslim candidate. Like talk about feeling it from the right and the left. It's more red flags, and I think just being aware of how anti-Semitism is being used now for political ends and not to the benefit and safety of the Jewish people is really, really concerning.
Mark, thank you. And I'm just really appreciating the I think you can critical thought that's going on it that. I share your I'm like, oh no, this is really scary. And it's using exactly Trump's, we're talking about, these are Democratic candidates. They're not even Republicans, right? This is the Democratic primary. Right. But what we get from Project Esther seeps in. And that's why we have to be sharp in our analysis of having an alternative for our safety. I mean, look, if you literally aren't caring about any other humans, you could just say it for our own safety is not going to work. Or you could say, I care about the safety of all humans. It's either way. Okay. And again, I have this feel very strongly about this because I'm worried about it and I find it infuriating. So that's my transparent, and I'm open to being I hope that I'm wrong about it. I hope that I'm wrong. But yeah. And so actually, Mark, these are the last couple things that we're going to do, is just because you just mentioned Project Esther. So we're going to end on a note that I feel is, again, in my own opinion, is hopeful, really hopeful, actually, like deeply hopeful. But what? Yeah. But first, I just want to, Benita, can you just share the website, the Heritage Foundation's? I said Project Esther, and then I put a link. So in my anti-Semitism email, I invited people to read Project Esther for yourself, so that you're leaving before the, okay. Yeah, so if you can share that, Benita. Okay, great. And Lenny, can you just zoom out a little bit? So this is exactly what we've been saying. So Project Esther, called, and I'm putting air quotes intentionally, a national strategy to combat anti-Semitism. Of course, this plan is literally, in its authors, have literal Nazis. I'm not saying that as an exaggeration. And they're not the people who I think will keep us safe. And this plan really works to pit us against the Palestinian liberation movement. It uses that as the first target, but then we know, because it plays on our fear of Hamas, plays on our fear, a likely target that will go along with is being against pro-Palestinian, whatever, but then it actually goes to name all of these progressive organizations that it has a plan to go for. And actually, I was in a meeting with someone here, I think Mark, I don't remember if it was you, but Lenny, if you can, something that's just very like scary about Project Esther, but is like extremely telling. So this is the Heritage Foundation. I just want to point this out. This is the Heritage Foundation's website. This is, look at issue debrief, progressivism. So it's very telling. This is the Heritage Foundation's website, right-wing think tank, okay? And they're publishing things. This is not like issue debrief, like how to protect Jews or something, or like the problem of anti-Semitism. This is issue debrief. You know how they think about progressivism. So this is actually their plan about progressivism. Like that to me is almost more telling. Not anti-Semitism, but progressivism. Exactly. And we know who the progressives are. Thank you, Beth. Yeah. So this to me is like almost more telling than like anything else. A strategy. If I were going to name this article, it wouldn't be a strategy to combat anti-Semitism. It would be like a strategy to break up the progressive movement so that we can win. October 7th. Oh, wow. I've never noticed that. Well, yeah, but yeah. Right. Okay. Right. Okay. So, right. And they can have a strategy to try to break up the progressive movement. We will fight for the progressive movement if people are trying to break it up. But what feels personally offensive is that they're using Jews to do it. That's my personal. Okay. All right. And what we're going to do is there's what's actually, and this has been such a, thank you all. We're at time. So hopefully people can just stay for like 2 more minutes. Okay, good. Okay. 2 more minutes. This has been such a good discussion. And I sort of was like, just going with the spaciousness of the flow, but the thing that about this election that actually to me offers like deep hope is that actually there was an example of a different form of safety in this election that I think was like very loud and very inspiring, and also echoes other examples of what I like to call shared society, like standing together in Israel, Israelis and Palestinians working together. A lot of work that I've personally done in Masafer Yatta, where there's Jews and Palestinians working together. And then there's Brad Lander, who I want to say that as a Jewish leader in this time, I feel like Jewish leaders mostly right now are not so inspiring. Just want to say, I'm like, oh my God, so many Jewish leaders are not leading at all. Like they're in positions of leadership, but being not leaderful. I feel that Brad and Benita, that just to end this, you can share where it says Brad Lander. So Brad Lander also running for mayor. And basically the story of this mayoral election is that Zoran and Brad decided to cross-endorse each other. So let's watch. So okay, this just, I wouldn't cut it off except that we have to end. But let's just watch what Brad says, because in my opinion, and we will talk about this more too, by the way, on like about this concept of working together, and is it naive? Is it the only thing we can actually spiritually fight for? Like all of this. But I want you to watch.
Hey, good morning. How's it going? Please go second. No, I insist you go second. How about I go first and you go second? Well, we both love New York City. And that's why it's so important to not send scandal-ridden, corrupt Andrew Cuomo to City Hall. New Yorkers deserve so much better than a disgraced creep. Agreed. Zoran, you've done a remarkable job building a historic grassroots campaign for a New York City all New Yorkers can afford. Brad, you've been a principled, progressive leader in our city for years. Early voting starts tomorrow, and we both know what we need to do to save our city from Andrew Cuomo. You want to tell him? You go first. Nah, you go first. Let's do it together. We're cross-endorsing. In New York City, we have ranked choice voting. That means you can rank up to 5 candidates for mayor. Brad and I are officially telling our supporters. Rank me number one, rank Zoran number 2. Let's send Andrew Cuomo back to the suburbs.
Okay, so Brad Lander saying, I am proud as a Jewish New Yorker to stand on this slate alongside a Muslim New Yorker. Then what did he say? Our safety, our liberation, our thriving is bound up together. Don't get it twisted. Pretty powerful words. And so we can continue this conversation over the next month, but thank you all so much for engaging in this, to really listening to each other. And the main takeaway is like, let's be paying attention and thinking critically, and talking to each other and listening to each other and being open to being wrong and being in touch with our own integrity about this too. So thank you all. Thank you so much. Yeah.